Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod, Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump.
Let's compare the plans. I have a plan. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight.
This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country.
The first and maybe only debate of the two names on the ballot this 2024.
Both candidates portrayed themselves as better for the economy.
The highlights and lowlights.
And she mocked his crowd size, which he usually uses as a marker of his own strength.
That's tough.
Pollster Frank Luntz on the memes and the lies.
Donald Trump is going to double down on his claim that people are eating their dogs and cats. I can't believe I'm saying that on CNBC.
All the morning after analysis.
When debates didn't change the outcome, that was before social media.
That's why I stayed up to watch the entire thing, because I don't trust anybody else's opinion.
Plus, one big celebrity endorsement.
Speak to the Taylor Swift of it all.
They are never, ever, ever getting back together.
And the consumer price index for August, inflation cooling, which means the Federal Reserve is likely set to cut interest rates starting next week. The investor who inspired The Big Short, Steve Eisman, joins us.
I think people spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the Fed's going to do. My guess is the Fed will cut 25 basis points, and that'll be fine. I don't think it's really that important for long-term investors.
It's Wednesday. It is September 11th, 23 years since an historic day. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We are live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernen. Andrew's going to be joining us a little later in the program from Los Angeles.
Kamala Harris, let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump faced off in a fiery debate last night. Eamon Javers joins us now with some highlights that centered around the economy, inflation, and the deficit. Hey, Eamon.
Hey, Joe, that's right. It was a lively and at times raucous debate last night. It was the first meeting between these two candidates, and right from the first handshake, Kamala Harris appeared to succeed in her mission of putting Donald Trump on the defensive by baiting him with some of the issues that are known to rattle him and get under his skin, even as Harris largely avoided answering questions about her own flip-flops on key issues. The debate began with the economy. So for our audience, all of the important stuff was right in the first third of the debate, as both candidates portrayed themselves as better for the economy. Donald Trump suggested that inflation has been a disaster under Kamala Harris. Here's what he said.
We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago.
And for her part, Kamala Harris citing Goldman Sachs, suggesting that her administration would be better for the economy. Here's what she said.
The best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit.
And guys, on the way out of the debate, Donald Trump actually went to the spin room. That's where, aides and pundits and everybody typically go to talk to reporters and spin the result of the debate. Donald Trump himself went there to do some spinning of his own in person.
Best debate ever. It was my best debate ever, I think.
What Trump said in the spin room there after the debate last night was that he knows that Harris wants another debate. He's not so sure that he wants another debate. So there was an expectation that there would be a second one of these guys. Now, not so clear until the dust settles as both campaigns decide whether last night was good for them and whether they want to do it all over again. Back over to you.
You burying the lead, Tay-Tay?
Taylor Swift.
Oh, Taylor Swift. Yes. Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris on Instagram last night.
It's not the lead.
That came late in the night.
I know. It's not the lead, but it just, I don't know. It's funny in the world that we're living in right now.
Trump was asked about that in the spin room, by the way, and he said, I have no idea what to make of that.
Yeah. And he said it shows you the elitists and the, I don't know. It was I watch half of it, maybe, or so. And I need to get my beauty rest, Eamon, I really do. And I don't need to watch it because all I need is to read social media the next day, and I know exactly how I'm supposed to feel about everything.
So that's why I stayed up to watch the entire thing, because I don't trust anybody else's opinion on it. It's such a subjective thing. A lot of people will walk away and see different things from this.
No, there's no doubt that the expectations were low. She baited him. He didn't do himself any favors whatsoever in being grievance-based and everything else again. But I don't think the moderators served themselves well, Eamon. I know you probably disagree with that.
What I will say is that I don't know any more about her. This was unforced errors on his part. He took the bait and went down. But
they didn't force her to answer any of the even
correct. But if you looked at the
what about leaving tariffs on? I saw that part. Did you leave any tariffs on? She started talking about. I don't know. I was raised in a middle class.
Look, you went to bed before things got really interesting.
Right, I did.
Because I will say, having watched the entire thing, he performed worse and worse as it went on.
He definitely
He took the bait when she threw things out that went at his ego. There were two issues in particular. One where she said everybody leaves his rallies, or people leave his rallies early because
crowd size.
He talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
Right, because they're boring, and he came back and went after that. Instead of he was on the defensive because he allowed himself to be put on the defensive. He responded to everything she threw out. He called her a Marxist.
He just can't help himself.
Well, I saw the part with her father was a Marxist professor.
She didn't take the bait, though. She didn't respond to it, and she moved on to the next point.
A lot of those, I didn't, I wasn't a big fan of a lot of the
because it goes hyperbolic with
the expressions right from the very beginning. I didn't like them. If we have Frank Luntz on.
It's true. Look, all of that is true, but if you looked at the last debate, it was a situation where former President Trump definitely won that debate because Biden performed so badly.
He was debating against
Biden performed so badly. Right. Well, this was a situation where she didn't answer the questions a lot of times, didn't give you any more information.
And the fact checking was only one.
So
fact checking was as it always is. When mainstream media calls something fact checking, they mean looking for lies from Donald Trump. They don't fact check anyone else and look for it. Let me ask you one thing. One thing that they did point out, Eamon, that I saw pointed out was in the past, except for what Becky was talking about, where you really had someone who had lost. I mean, we know now that President Biden was probably in the early stages of something, whatever you want to call it. So throw that debate out. They're not usually like that. They usually don't change the outcome. But then that was. When debates didn't change the outcome, that was before social media, I think. I mean, I don't know. They could be more. Yeah. I think this might be a different period that we're in right now where debates could be more important.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I think actually social media might make them less important in the sense that you can slice and dice this and serve up your great moments to your base and make it look to your base like you won a debate that you actually may have lost. And so both sides are kind of hardened in terms of their views. I will say what was fascinating last night was to watch Kamala Harris use a lot of Donald Trump's debating tricks and political tricks against him right from the beginning. That opening handshake, these two people had never met before. Harris walks right across the stage, gets right into his space, and shakes his hand. It was clear that he didn't want to have a handshake, didn't really want to look at her for most of the night either. I think from that moment on, he was on the defensive. She called him a disgrace over and over again. That is a term that Donald Trump uses repeatedly to denounce people that are his enemies. That's his language.
The likes of which we've never seen.
And she mocked his crowd size, which he usually uses as a marker of his own strength.
That's tough.
Again, designed to get under his skin, and it clearly did. And he wasn't able to control himself in terms of his responses and pivot and focus on the things he wanted to focus on, which were inflation and immigration.
You immediately look at what's trending, and not trending for me, but just trending overall, and you just go down the list, and you can see how, like you're saying, you're going to see both sides. It's almost like the spin room on X. I immediately saw ABC moderators.
And they're mirror universes.
ABC moderator. I saw Snopes. You know why Snopes is on there? Because Snopes, which is supposedly a left-wing fact checker, fact-checked the Charlottesville quote, that he never did say that about Nazis being, good and fine people. So that was not fact-checked. That was by Muir or the moderators. And that I immediately saw that. So, they put that out as, do you see the post? And then this is a pretty good summary, though. Cam Bush, Trump rattled, but then then they get in that as Harris and ABC hosts gang up on him during the debate. So, I mean, that's a New York Post.
The other danger of social media, Joe, I would also say, is it seems like Trump, has spent a lot of time on right-wing social media, and you can kind of spiral down these rabbit holes of things that are, circulating on social media among the right wing that are important to them. They're commenting on it minute to minute, and you think that these issues resonate with a larger audience than they do, and that led Trump, I think, to bringing up this weird thing about immigrants eating pets, and it's just this bizarre thing that is a flashpoint on right-wing social media, but doesn't really exist in the minds of most Americans. And by the way, there's a lot of people look at that and say, "What are you talking about?"
There's a much tougher case if you're going to say this problem with Haitian immigrants coming into Springfield, Ohio. There's like 20,000 of them who have gone in. If you're going to make the case, you make the case about the 11-year-old boy who was killed last year by a Haitian immigrant who didn't have a driver's license, who hit a school bus. There are cases to be made, but as you mentioned, it's the weird stuff that has been debunked. Going after that and trying to make that front and center, not a wise idea. By the way, he called it Springfield, Illinois.
Circulating on right-wing social media doesn't necessarily resonate with regular American voters. And I think Trump allowed himself to be drawn down that spiral into those rabbit holes in a way that you don't want to do when you're speaking to a big national audience like that. I mean,
they named the Simpsons' hometown Springfield because there are so many. I live in Springfield.
Springfield, Massachusetts. There's a lot of
Springfield, New Jersey. Springfield.
Yeah, there's a lot of Springfield.
Yeah, exactly. Springfield, New Jersey. It's right next to where I live. I don't know, Eamon. I just wonder what it means. Long way to go. You look at the betting sites, they did move, but it's still basically tied. Or maybe Kamala Harris is now up a point. I don't know. What do you call it? It's
going to be tight all the way down.
On the betting sites, it's not a percentage. It's a
percentage points. I don't know.
Pennies. It's on a dollar of bet. All right, Javers. Thank you.
Whatever you're doing when you're betting, you're losing. House always wins, Joe.
She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country.
Roll Pro A, up track, stand Andrew by.
Hey, Paul. Good morning. How are you?
Up and Andrew, Q.
I'm Andrew Sorkin, along with Joe Kernen and Becky Quick. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
We've got so much going on. Joining us right now is political strategist and pollster Frank Luntz. Frank, want to get your reaction to what you saw last night. I followed you on Twitter, and you said after this debate, the Harris campaign will have little reason to do another one. What do you mean?
Well, the fact is, it appears that Harris actually gave more details last night than Trump. It appears as though she was more presidential than Donald Trump, even though she's never been president. And it appears that Donald Trump is going to double down on his claim that people are eating their dogs and cats. I can't believe I'm saying that on CNBC. And I know that the people want me in your control room, want me to speak about the economy. But last night's debate, and I remember how I felt in 2020 watching Donald Trump time after time after time after time light into Joe Biden, alienating the people he was trying to win. The level of detail in last night's debate from Harris and from Trump on their economic policies was so slim that the public was left wanting. And as I'm following it, I'm being texted and emailed by people who watch your program and how disappointed they were in both candidates for not being explicit, in both candidates for not being articulate about exactly what they would do, particularly with inflation, particularly with economic concerns. but that Trump missed a golden opportunity to speak up and speak out about why we're in the situation we are now, and that, frankly, he lost the debate last night. Not that she won, but that he lost.
And let's talk about that then. What do you think the distinction is? You said not that she lost, or not that he lost, but that she won, or not that she won, but he lost. What do you mean by that?
That there was person after person who were on the shows after the debate, delivering talking points, being typically partisan, and saying that whoever they supported won the debate. But the fact is, his talking about, and I still can't believe I'm saying this on CNBC, the idea that anywhere in America they're eating their pets, and he will never acknowledge, and he did not last night. The moderators gave him a chance repeatedly to acknowledge that he made a mistake, that he cannot do that. Well, let me tell you, Andrew, the undecided voters are not voting over policy, they're voting over personality. And the idea that someone can be president for 4 years and not make a mistake and not acknowledge with humility that you don't get everything right is going to cost him this election. On the issues, Andrew, Trump had the advantage: inflation, immigration, the two issues that matter most. But instead, he prosecuted Harris with the same kind of anger and the contempt that he showed towards Joe Biden. It absolutely feeds his base. It will absolutely be cheered on by 43% of America. But the goal in any debate is to win that undecided, and he most certainly failed to do that last night.
We saw Elon Musk tweet out that he thought that the vice president exceeded expectations. Do you think that there's a sense among undecideds, and by the way, not even just undecideds, was there anybody on the Trump side that you think switched after seeing this? No.
No, I don't believe that Trump lost a single vote last night. But that segment, that 5% in the key swing states, he gave them no reason to vote for him on economic issues, which is their number one priority. He went back again and again and again to immigration, but he did that ineffectively. You can't just beat up on your opponent. You have to have solutions. And Trump did as president. But the fact is, last night was a very poor debate performance for someone whose campaign has done quite well in articulating the difference between himself and Vice President Harris. The Trump campaign is succeeding in drawing a distinction, in drawing a clear difference. But the candidate himself failed last night. And in fact, if he doesn't apologize and backtrack on the eating of pets, again, I apologize to your viewers for saying this, right. But if he doesn't do it, the press is going to eat him alive over the next 48 hours.
Frank, speak to the Taylor Swift of it all and what you think that endorsement means or does not.
It's important for younger voters. It actually does mean something. We polled on this, and if I'd known you were going to ask this question, I would have given your viewers the chance to see it. A third of Americans think Trump is more credible. A third of Americans think Biden is more credible. But 1/4 of Americans actually are listening to what she says. And it's primarily younger voters, primarily female voters, but they matter in this campaign. And actually, as we wake up this morning, we should not just be talking about the impact on the presidential race, but Taylor Swift will help bring out younger voters, and make no mistake, they will not be voting Republican down ticket. Andrew, this is the first time I've said this on CNBC, but this morning, Republican House candidates and Senate candidates have to be considering where they stand. Because if you turn out younger voters who prefer the Democrats over the Republicans, and particularly younger women, by 25%, you could have a earthquake in the congressional races that provides Democrats with what they've been seeking all along, a trifecta: Senate, House, and presidency.
Final question for you, Frank, just about the moderators, because there has been this critique among some, mostly Trump supporters, but it seemed your tweets last night seemed to suggest you thought they did a good job, and a lot of people have looked to you as a Republican pollster for a very long time.
Yes, but I've been very straight on this program and on other programs. The moderators have been under attack for fact-checking Trump and not Harris. And all you have to do is put all of those challenges back. Who did they challenge? Now, the argument on the Harris side is that she didn't say anything wrong. But the fact is, viewers looked at this and they thought that it wasn't necessarily fair. And this could be the way that Trump survives. Just as he was indicted and convicted, every time those indictments came down over the last 18 months, Trump's numbers went up because he looked like a victim to voters. But I will also tell you that I'm being texted and emailed, even right now, by billionaires who love your program, who are saying that last night simply wasn't fair. They acknowledge that Trump did horribly, but they also are complaining about how he was held to a different standard than Kamala Harris. And that could make a difference in the long term in how people perceive this. Frankly, if I'm the Harris campaign, I'm not doing another debate. There is no reason to.
Frank Luntz, always great to get your perspective, especially on a morning like today. Thank you.
Thanks.
There you are. What can we say this, Andrew? There's definitely still going to be a lot of bad blood between these two parties, and they are never, ever, ever getting back together. If Trump doesn't shake it off, it's going to be that we find out that we knew what was going on all too well. Do you know any of those songs, Andrew? Any recognition at all with that?
I noticed a couple of the lines, not all of them, but I think
you think I normally say things like we're never, ever, ever getting back together?
I know.
That you know.
That I know.
Bad blood. Cool summer.
It's a factor. I mean, Andrew's right to bring it up.
That's what I said. We buried the lead. I guess we should have started with that.
Andrew, good to see you, by the way, and thank you for getting up so incredibly early on the West Coast. We're going to have a lot more when we come back on Squawk Box.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up, the last piece for the Federal Reserve's inflation puzzle, digesting today's consumer price index reading, the key to a rate cut or not, with Neuberger Berman's Steve Eisman.
If the Fed cuts rates sufficiently, the housing market might start to come back, which would be very helpful for the economy.
And the portfolio manager weighs in on Vice President Harris's plan for housing.
I think that the proposal to hand out $25,000 to first-time homebuyers is stupid. I'm not going to pull any punches on that.
Squawk Pod will be right back. Welcome back to Squawk Pod.
Stand by, Joe. His mic, cue.
People think I know a lot of Taylor Swift. Google. There's a Google. I have a Google.
Yeah, but she does have a lot of really well-known songs.
She does. Oh, no, it's insane. It's after the Beatles, I don't know anybody who's written 200 songs, where 50 of them are, to her fans, are, huge.
And now the headline investors have been waiting for, the Consumer Price Index, a measure of the cost of goods and services across the American economy. The CPI is a key to the Federal Reserve's decision whether to start cutting interest rates at its meeting next week, and by just how much. Economists are largely expecting a 0.25 percentage point rate cut from the Fed. That's 0.25%. And today's CPI report did little to change that. For August, consumer prices rose 0.2%. That is in line with expectations. Now, the 12-month inflation rate is down to 2.5%. That is almost a whole 0.5 percentage point lower than July. And now, sitting at its lowest level since early 2021, before recent price surges. So a pretty good report. Inflation has cooled, and interest rate cuts, well, they might be coming. Let's get back to Becky quick.
All right, for more on the CPI data, the Fed, and the markets, we want to bring in Steve Eisman. Of course, he's senior portfolio manager at Neuberger Berman, also somebody who saw everything with The Big Short long ahead of time, was able to see what was happening. Steve, we come to you on a lot of issues because you have been so incredibly right on some of the bets you've made. Where do you think things stand right now for the financials? Because it does feel like a little bit of an inflection point. We heard from Bank of America yesterday saying that things look pretty good, but you also heard from Jamie Dimon saying that there could be some concerns out there on the broader spectrum. You haven't been worried about the banks in a while. You still feel that way?
From a systemic perspective?
From a systemic perspective, no. You have not been buying banks,
right.
But you have not been...
From a systemic perspective, I lose absolutely no sleep about the banks. They're extremely well capitalized. They're far better run. They understand their risks better than they ever have. And there's nothing to worry about with respect to the banks. To invest them is another story.
Yeah, you didn't like them a year ago. How are you feeling about them now?
I don't think there's a story with respect to the banks. I mean, I find them to be trading vehicles. People use them as a means to express how they feel about the economy. You know, right now, what's facing the banks is the Fed's going to cut rates, and that's going to hurt net interest margins, which is what J.P. Morgan said yesterday. Credit quality is getting slightly worse on the margin, which is what Ally said, and people got hysterical and took the stock down over 20%. But there's no story with respect to the banks right now.
If it's a trading vehicle and JP Morgan shares were down $11 on concerns about net interest income, is that an opportunity to buy in on a trading moment?
You know, this is what I don't do. I don't trade. So if there's a long-term story, I'll own it. I don't think there's great long-term stories generally in the financial sector. There are a few, things here and there, like you can own Visa long-term because it's a great business. But there's no great story in the banks right now, one way or the other.
And what do you anticipate from the Fed next week? If it doesn't matter for financials, it does matter beyond that.
I actually think there's reality and there's perception. And I think people spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the Fed's going to do. My guess is the Fed will cut 25 basis points, and that'll be fine. That it's important on the margin. It's certainly important on Fed Day. I don't think it's really that important for long-term investors.
We were talking in the commercial break ahead of time about your prediction that Donald Trump was going to win. You came out with that prediction a while ago.
I said that 100% certainty he would win.
100% certainty. It was days before Joe Biden stepped out of the race.
So in my own defense, I will say that I made that prediction before the first debate between Trump and Biden. I felt very strongly about it. That prediction was looking really good after the debate, and I withdraw it. I did not anticipate that a sitting president of the United States was going to drop out of the race. It's never happened before. I think the election is a toss-up. I mean, if I had to stake my life on it, I would say still probably Trump wins because he'll win Pennsylvania. But it's too hard to tell.
I thought you were going to follow up. You had a lot of questions.
And I owe you an apology. Because the last time I was on,
I have no idea where you're going. I'm scared.
I know you don't. The last time I was on, you pressed me about the fact that the low-end consumer is having problems, and I gave you very short shrift about it because I didn't think it was important with respect to the market.
Okay, let me just think back on times you've blown me off. No, I can't narrow it down.
It was the last time I was here.
No, I'm kidding. No, I remember that. Yeah, but you have a great.
And the reason why I gave you short shrift because nobody's asked me about the low-end consumer since 2008.
One of the most charming things about, and charming is sort of in an interesting term, but is your unvarnished response to many questions that you think may or may not be good questions, which is why we have you on so much, because it's refreshing.
But what do you think now about that?
No, there's no question the lower end consumer is having problems. You see that in Dollar Tree, Dollar General. You saw that with Ally, but I don't think that it is dispositive in terms of the market or the economy. I mean, it means the economy is slowing, and it's definitely slowing. But the last time the lower end consumer was really important was 2006, 7, and 8, when that consumer was over-levered. And that consumer is not over-levered. That consumer is just having issues in terms of income is not keeping up with inflation.
Is that sometimes, though, almost the canary in the coal mine, that problems start there and then work their way up the ladder?
I mean, they've worked their way through already. I mean, the economy has slowed, but like I said, it's not a systemic issue. The banks have never been in this great shape in anyone's lifetime. What
about the non-traditional banks? Other areas where you can see leverage pile up, other areas that are not as tightly regulated?
I got that question on a podcast I was on a couple of weeks ago. The problem is that there's so little data that you could extrapolate and create any nightmare scenario you want. But
are any of them plausible scenarios?
I don't think so, but given that the data, there's so little of it, you could spin any tale you want. At this point, the only thing that we can see is that delinquencies are up a little, losses are up a little. I think people got hysterical yesterday about Ally when they just said that delinquents would be somewhat higher than expected. They didn't say they were going to blow up.
Can you put your prediction hat on the makeup of the three branches of government and whether that would change your view on anything in terms of if there was an unrealized capital gain, if it was a clean sweep?
If Harris wins and both houses go Democratic, I think that's probably extremely negative for the stock market. I put a very low probability of that happening.
And if it was just gridlock, 2 out of 3, one way or the other?
Then I think the economy's fine and the market drives higher.
And everything that we've already done percolates through and it's okay. We've had our inflation scare.
Right. And the Fed will cut rates somewhat next year. The economy will be fine.
200 basis points total? How much?
You know what?
You don't know.
I have absolutely no interest in trying to predict how much the Fed's going to cut rates. I think it's a waste of everyone's
time. They'll cut enough, and the next recession is what year?
I have no idea. The only thing I think is that if the Fed cuts rates sufficiently, the housing market might start to come back, which would be very helpful for the economy.
Steve, the reason you think the stock market has an incredibly negative response if the Democrats take all three?
Well, people are going to really start to worry about much higher taxes, much greater levels of regulation, and then they'll start to spin any nightmare scenario they want until we figure out what's going to happen.
Andrew?
Hey, Steve, I have a housing question about Vice President Harris's proposal around first-time buyers and the government effectively handing out money to first-time buyers and what that would mean. I'm curious what you think it would mean both to the price of a home and to the housing market writ large.
I think that the proposal to hand out $25,000 to first-time home buyers is stupid. I'm not going to pull any punches on that. Will have absolutely no impact on housing sales. All it will do is drive the price of first-time home buyers for the houses that they want up by probably about $25,000. So the problems with housing are not demand; they are supply. There's not enough new homes being built, and interest rates went up too much for people to be able to buy existing homes. That's not we're going to give people $25,000. That won't solve the problem $1.
Hey, Steve, thank you for coming in. We always appreciate talking to you.
I didn't remember that, and but I like that you'll do that. If something else bothers me, will you apologize?
It's bothered me.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you. Programming note: J.D. Vance tomorrow is going to be sitting, I think, right where Steve is, and that should be. We have a lot to talk to him about. That'll be the day after the day after.
Mm-hmm.
Say, can you see?
And we are approaching 8:46 a.m. on the East Coast, and that's the time that American Airlines Flight 11 struck the North Tower at the World Trade Center 23 years ago today. The commemoration ceremony at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum in Lower Manhattan begins at that time with a moment of silence. It'll be followed by several others. The ceremony honors the 2,983 men, women, and children killed in the attacks at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and aboard United Airlines Flight 93 in 2001. Also those killed in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing.